Hi, so my name is Rachel Ryles, and I'm going to be giving you a short presentation on myself and my work as a ceramicist student here at the University of Southern Mississippi. So a little bit about me before we dig into what we're going to be talking about today. I'm from Tylertown, Mississippi. That's where I live. It's about an hour or so west of the Hattiesburg campus. It's a bit far of a drive to make every single day to school, but I've done it for the last 2.5 years and it hasn't killed me yet. So I'm a senior here at the University of Southern Mississippi. I'm actually graduating this semester, and my degree will be Art BA with an emphasis in sculpture and ceramics, although ceramics has taken precedence during my time here at Southern. So since I first touched clay a couple years ago, I have been fascinated with it and all of its possibilities. It's quite literally a very flexible medium that you can do a lot of things with. So I've experimented with hand building, wheel throwing, as well as slip casting during my time in undergrad. So in relation to my recent work, we're going to specifically be talking about the pit firing process. And for those who aren't familiar with pit firing, it's basically the most primitive form of firing that turns clay into ceramic. So to create a pit fire, you basically dig a hole in the ground, you add combustibles like sawdust or dried grass clippings or clay or straw, and then you add copper carbonate or sulfate, you add your pieces, you add wood, and then you light it on fire. And the goal of pit firing is basically to embed the surface of your pots with like swirls of black and red and blue and orange and whatever you can get out of it. And it sounds really simple, and it can be. But this semester, I decided to try something different, to add another element to it. And that element is to find a liner glaze to go on the inside of my pots that could, one, withstand the harsh pit firing process, and two, add a utilitarian value to my pieces. So essentially, I wanted to make pit-fired vessels that would be able to be safely eaten and drank out of. So let's talk a bit about my first results. I had thrown bowls and cups, fired them to 1500 degrees Fahrenheit, glazed them with a low fire glaze, fired them again to mature the glaze, and then fired them inside of our pit at school. And even though I was fairly happy with the surface results that I got, the glaze results were pretty much an entire fail. The glaze I used was a low fire glaze. It consisted mostly of borax. If that sounds familiar, that's because it's what you can find in your kitchen to clean your sink and all kinds of things with. So the glaze I used was a low fire mottled turquoise glaze. And what the borax does basically is it helps it to melt at a lower temperature. But the issue was that the borax in the glaze caused it to turn really gnarly and rough. And you can see here, like the lip is definitely it's not utilitarian. It actually absorbed the combustibles from the pit fire. So quite disappointing. I didn't expect to get it right the first time, since the entire process of pit firing is very experimental for me. So adding another element in that and trying to find a liner glaze was pretty vexing and difficult for someone who didn't have much experience with pit firing in the first place. So that being said, after the first disappointing results, I decided to try a simpler route and try a clear glaze, since I think that the colorants that I was using in the turquoise liner glaze were reacting kind of badly on their own. So I threw more cups and bowls, I fired them to 1500 degrees, applied a clear glaze that I had mixed up, and then I fired them again to 1500 degrees to mature the glaze, just like I did the first time. But this time, instead of borax, this glaze consisted mostly of frits. So it was about 80% frit altogether. And what frits do is they allow the glaze to melt at a lower temperature, like the borax that we mentioned before. But unlike straight borax, they're much more stable. So I fired these pieces, and then I was ready to pit fire. This time, I fired these pieces at home in my backyard in 2 different pits that I dug into the ground to kind of experiment with different depths, giving it more oxygen, giving it less oxygen, etc. One thing that really appeals to me about this process is that it can be done anywhere. So anyway, At this point, my glaze is applied and I start to assemble the pit fire. I follow all the steps. So I added combustibles like sawdust and grass clippings. I added salt, copper carbonate, and then I began to load my pieces in. And this is where more of the experimentation starts to come in. So since my last pieces ended up with the combustibles from the pit fire actually sticking to the inside and leaching into the glaze, I decided that instead of half burying my pieces, I would put the glazed pieces lip down. And my thought behind this was that it would keep the materials from the pit fire from falling into the pots and becoming embedded, and that it would preserve the glaze better. So here I'm doing it with a bowl, and here I'm doing it with a small cup. So then I began adding more copper carbonate, compost, just to see what would happen, to see what kind of surface results I could get, then newspaper to cushion the pieces, and then wood, and then I lit it on fire. And for the most part, it worked. The glaze stayed mostly undisturbed, and the lip is definitely more comfortable to drink out of than the bowl that I had mentioned before. Although there are still micro fractures in the surface of the glaze, and any liquid that you put into the cups will slowly seep out over time. So my next step is to find a glaze that is less prone to crazing and cracking. But I'm one step closer to my goal, and I feel like I made a lot of progress this semester with the time that I had and everything else that was going on. You know, even though I'm graduating, this is something that I am immensely interested in and something that I can see myself pursuing in the future as, I don't know, maybe a studio potter, maybe as a high school teacher, maybe as a university professor. I don't know yet. Thank you for tuning in. I'll see you around. Thank you.